This is Travis Wayne Goodsell. This is part 4, and this will be about Maimonides. I've probably been pronouncing his name incorrectly on the previous videos, so I apologize for that, and I'll try to make sure that I pronounce it as accurately as I'm capable of. Maimonides had laws pertaining to the Messiah, and instead of giving you an overview of who he was, and I'll let you do the research on that for yourself. He's obviously a Jew, and he had written extensively about laws pertaining to the Messiah. It's JewsForJerusalem.org is my source for this material, and so I trust that that source is legitimate, and I'll be reading over what the website had on Maimonides and the topic of the last days Messiah. And so from Halacha 1, it says, in the future the Messianic king will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty. And I've already discussed that. Restoring to it its original sovereignty. So again, nothing new. We know all this. He will build the temple, which means he's also a high priest. And thus he's not just a king, he's a king and a high priest, making him a theocratic leader, not just a government leader. And thus he is a Melchizedek, as understood in Hebrew. And he will gather the dispersed of Israel. Then, in his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to their previous state. So again, Jews are thinking, oh yeah, law of Moses. Not quite. This is pre-Moses is what we're talking about here. The last days Messiah will restore the ancient order that the house of Israel had, not what Moses had. Moses tried to do it, people couldn't handle it, and so he completely altered it and made the law of Moses, and that distinguishes him. But the last days Messiah will not be strictly observant to the law of Moses. There are some things that are good, obviously, but we don't need to banish women to little boxes out in the wilderness separated from society until their menstrual cycle is up. Yeah, we're not doing that. Sorry. So that you understand the ancient order of things, not the law of Moses. The website is saying we will offer sacrifices, indicating the Jews, I guess. But it's the whole house of Israel will be involved in the temple. So if he's going to gather the dispersed of Israel, not just Jews, the temple is for the whole house of Israel, not just Jews. So, yeah, sacrifices will be offered, and it's not just killing of animals and then tossing the carcasses to the side. No, the ancient practice is, it's no different than having a hamburger for dinner. It's just in a different concept. It's a religious dedication. Observe the sabbatical and jubilee years. It must be understood that I've already talked about a Sabbath day. The Sabbath day was not practiced among the house of Israel. It was a Babylonian creation. The seventh day being a superstitious day, and thus the seventh day for the Babylonians was a day that you did not work because of the superstition of 7. And because the Bible was written post-captivity, the Jew was influenced highly by the Babylonian culture and put in the imposition that originally there was a Sabbath day, but there was none. Babylon created it. Babylon is the origin, so thus no Sabbath day. But the law of Moses has a sabbatical year and a jubilee year. That's for the planting and harvesting and taking care of the poor that are involved in that, and the people who are wrongly imprisoned were also involved in this. And so understand that what Maimonides is proposing is a biased influence, not an actual law for the king, future Messiah, to follow. He doesn't have to conform to Maimonides, he has to conform to the Torah. If you remember the first video I did, I specifically outlined that in Jewish authoritative positions, the Torah comes first. And Maimonides may have been a great man, knowledgeable man, who Jews revere as authoritative. Just understand he's not the supreme authority. So this is just his information. So please understand that. The future last days Messiah does not have to conform to what Maimonides says. This is just his educated guess from his understanding of the Torah. Okay. All right. Anyone who does not believe in him or does not await his coming, which means the last days Messiah, denies not only the statements of the other prophets, and I did that video, but those of the Torah and Moses, our teacher. The Torah testified to his coming, and I did that. I showed you. The Torah testified of it, and they utilize Deuteronomy 30, verse 3 through 5, whereas I gave you Deuteronomy 18:15, but Deuteronomy 33 through 5, they only have 3 quoted here. It says, God will bring back your captivity and have mercy upon you. He will again gather you from among the nations, even if your diaspora is at the ends of the heavens. God will gather you up from there and bring you to the land. And I already discussed how it's the United States, not Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is the distractive con game by the evil rulers of the world. So understand that. These explicit words of the Torah include all the statements made by all the prophets. Reference to Mashiach, the Messiah, that's the Hebrew pronunciation, is also made in the portion of Balaam, who prophesies about 2 anointed kings. The first anointed king, David, who saved Israel from her oppressors, and the final anointed king who will arise from his descendants and save Israel in the end of days. That passage, Numbers 24:7 through 18, and they only cover 17, relates. I see it, but not now. And they have a commentary, this refers to David. I perceive it, but not in the near future. And commentary, this refers to the Messianic king. A star shall go forth from Jacob. This refers to David, they say. And a staff shall arise in Israel. And they say this refers to the Messianic king. And crushing all of Moab's princes. And then they say that's David. He smote man. Anyway, that's David. Decimating all of Seth's descendants. This is key and crucial. This refers to the Messianic king. And when I get to Egyptian, this will all make sense. They then quote Zechariah 9:10, which I did in yesterday's video. Edom will be demolished, and they claim that's referring to David. So the passage in Numbers, they're saying, is a dualism in prophecy for both King David and the last days Messiah. And then finally they have Seir will be destroyed. And they say that refers to the last days Messiah, last days king, as Obadiah 1:21 prophesies. Saviors will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau. Esau is the descendants of Esau, the brother of Jacob, of whom was the birthright and blessing, but it was usurped by Jacob. And it says saviors. Joshua, Jesus, Christ's will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau. So the world. So there will be anointed ones. So it's not just this Messianic king. He will establish a religion of people who will also be anointed. So they will be sharing government authority and sharing religious authority. Moses himself said, would that all be prophets. And that was Moses' intention, but the people weren't able to handle it. This last days Messiah will have everybody equal. And so even though he's the initiator, we see here from Obadiah, which is actually Obadiah in King James Version pronunciation, spelling, that the Bible is saying, hey, everybody will be in charge of the government. Similar to a democracy, but we've already established that the Messianic King, the Messiah, last days Messiah, will be establishing a law for everybody to follow. Thus, what I've been pushing for is a constitutional republic, where the Constitution becomes the supreme law of the land and everybody governs themselves. Everybody's equal. There is no class or status. You know, everybody is all equal. They're all kings and high priests. Okay. Halacha 2. Similarly, with regard to the cities of refuge, from Deuteronomy 19:8, when God will expand your borders, you must add 3 more cities. This command was never fulfilled. Surely God did not give this command in vain. There is no need to cite proofs from the works of the prophets, for all their books are filled with mention of this matter. So in other words, yeah, the last days Messiah is going to rule the world, not just Israel. So understand that. Halacha 3. One should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead. This is where I referred to yesterday about resurrecting the dead, or perform other similar deeds. This is definitely not true. If you look at what's going on, specifically when you look at John, when he says that the beast will perform miracles and wonders, how is Donald Trump presenting miracles and wonders? He's using the miracle of TV to present his talking image and you know, entertaining the people as he spouts his blasphemies. So yes, this Messianic king can work miracles, he can work wonders, he can bring about new phenomena in the world, he can possibly resurrect the dead. As I mentioned yesterday, we have DNA technology. We can repair human DNA. We can change human DNA so that we have different eye color, different skin color, different hair color. You know, we can make those changes. We can adjust our height. You know, instead of being 5 feet, you can be 6'5" like me. Or they can alter me back down to 5 feet. You know, give women larger breast size. We have that technology now. It's weird and creepy, but it can be done. And thus, if we're able to restore the DNA of a human, we can prolong our lives. But like I said, in a ransom economy that we have here in the United States, it's not profitable, because it doesn't make sense, because you think that if a person lives longer, that therefore they're able to pay more through their slavery to those in control and power, but they don't see it that way. They want a limited number of people. It's weird the way they think. The alt-right conservative evil people who are running our nation and destroying it. But anyway, okay, and then they talk about a past rabbi who talks about a sage who everybody thought was a messianic king, but he died, and therefore nobody believed in him as a messianic king. Yeah, you got to be careful. Just because you've heard things about what this future last days Messiah will do doesn't mean he has to conform to them. I'm sure you've seen many movies that talk about people who are mythological legends in the movie, and when the people who hear about them, Braveheart, there you go, Mel Gibson's Braveheart, he's supposed to be this colossal figure who's killed, you know, thousands alone and done mighty things. And then when the people see him on his horse about to go into battle, I thought you were taller. So it's like that. So don't use your preconceived thinking about who he's supposed to be when he actually is here, because he is here, and I've done the videos on that in the books and the blogs, and so yeah, I mean, if you're going to be using your own interpretations, your own beliefs to impose on what he's supposed to do, what he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to look like, you're going to fool yourself. you're going to be deceived. So be careful on that. All right, halacha 4. And again, I can't do the in Hebrew, so excuse me for that if I'm not pronouncing it the way people demand that it be pronounced. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, it's talking about if a king will arise from the house of David who diligently contemplates the Torah. And I told you from yesterday's video, the last days Messiah will not be a king. He is low of stature. That's what the Tanakh says. And so, Maimonides is imposing his thinking on the future last days Messiah, that he is a king before being a king, the King of Kings. And so it is not Trump, therefore. Lots of people were saying, oh, Trump is the last days Messiah. He's, made Jerusalem the capital of Israel, and he's killing people, and he's keeping people out and not gathering them, and everything that he's violating of the Torah. So it's not a current leader of any country. It is not the current leader of the United States. The United States is the corrupt kingdom. And so this last days Messiah is a commoner, a lowly person of stature, just a regular citizen. And so don't think that he has to be one of these charismatic politicians to raise them up as the Jewish Messiah, last days Messiah. So don't be fooled. Okay, so the thing that you want to watch for, which is kind of difficult because it doesn't allow for faith, it allows for results. And so when you demand that a person prove himself first before trusting in him and helping him accomplish, then you're running into a catch-22. Because it says here, if he succeeds, he is definitely the Messiah, the last days Messiah. Mashiach. And so, you can't wait for him to do all the work and then say, okay, fine, you win, I believe. Seeing is not believing. Seeing is knowing. And you have to actually believe, but you have to believe correctly. You can't impose who this person's supposed to be. There are many people who would love to have Obama back as president again. Watching the late night comedy shows last night, Stephen Colbert was talking about President Obama and showing his clips from the speeches that he's giving now. People cheered. People love Obama. SNL did a skit of Bring Back Obama or something like that, and did a whole song on it. So you can't elevate a person to be the one. You have to recognize in the person that he has the ability, capability, knowledge necessary to accomplish the thing, and then you've got to then say, okay, he can do it, let's give it a try and see if we can do it. And that's a difficult concept for people to trust in. And it is crucial that people understand that. You can't just say, there's no temple, thus there is no Messiah. The Jews have different sects of Jews. Some believe that they need to build the temple and then the last days Messiah will come. Others believe they have to wait for the last days Messiah, then build the temple. And then others believe that God will build the temple and then the last days Messiah will come. So yeah, you can't have all these differing opinions because the truth is independent of what people believe. And so what you need to do is what I'm doing for you now in these video series is look at all the prophecies from the Torah, the prophets, and traditions from other religions as well about this person, and that will then give you an idea of who to look for. For example, I pointed out Ezekiel 37, where the last days Messiah needs to know Egyptian and Paleo-Hebrew. Former President Obama does not know Egyptian and Hebrew. So right there you know he's not the one. It's not him. So as much as people want certain things to happen, want certain people to be the savior and the hero, it doesn't mean that they are the ones who will do it. You actually end up getting hurt when you realize your hopes are in vain. You'll also, if you've been watching President Obama's speeches lately, he gave one, was it last month or within a month, where he specifically said, don't look for a Messiah to save you. Don't look for a Savior. He denounced the last days Messiah. He denounced the second coming of Jesus as Christians believe this person's supposed to be. He revealed himself, Obama revealed himself as an anti-Christ, anti-Messiah. I don't know if people understood that when he said it. As far as I can tell, I've heard nobody talk about that. I've been the only one to identify it. So please, as much as you love to have somebody be the savior of our nation and fix everything, don't go by your feelings. Study, research, go over what I reference. Study it for yourself to identify who this person's supposed to be. He will then improve the entire world, motivating all nations to serve God together. As Zephaniah 3:9 states, I will transform the peoples to a pure language. This is the only passage in the Hebrew Tanakh in which all 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are included. So just as a little fun fact, that's why I say he'll know Paleo-Hebrew. This is where this comes from. And he will also, as we understand from this, create a unifying language for all the world. We have hundreds of languages, all different, in our world today. If we're going to gather everybody from all over the world, we have a couple of options, and some of them are not legitimate, so they're not going to be mentioned. But we either have to have a universal translator when we communicate with people so that we can all understand each other, or we have to create a unifying language. And this is what Zephaniah 3:9 is prophesying, that the last days Messiah will propose a new language to unify the whole world to one understanding, so that everybody will speak and understand the same language. And it's going to be difficult to get people out of the habit of doing away with English, doing away with Spanish, Portuguese, German, French, Turkish, Arabic. But that's what Zephaniah is prophesying for the last days Messiah. Okay, and so if he fails the Torah test, if he doesn't meet the qualifications, this is why the Jews do not believe Jesus is their Messiah, because Jesus failed to meet all of the qualifications. Jesus did not become the king. He was murdered. And so Jesus failed the test. And as I pointed out from the previous videos, Jesus, however, is a part of the theme from the Torah of the brother who is murdered, and his birthright blessing is usurped by the brother, but then a future descendant restores the birthright blessing of the murdered brother. So Jesus fits that as the murdered brother. And the Jews don't see it that way. They don't understand that theme prominent through the Torah. And so their last days Messiah is the one who's going to restore the kingdom of Jesus symbolically. Not just King David, not just Adam, not just Noah, not just Abraham. You see where I'm seeing? There's a pattern that persists throughout the Torah. And so the last days Messiah is just part of that pattern. Okay. What the set time is in the future. Alright, here we have Daniel 11:35, and some of the wise men will stumble to try them, to refine and to clarify until the appointed time, because the set time is in the future. Okay, so I guess that's saying that there are many people who are trying to find the date for when the last days Messiah will come, and they're going to fail because it's in the future. And then they talked about Jesus. He failed. But he didn't really fail. He was just the brother that was murdered theme in the Torah. Can there be a greater stumbling block than Christianity? So yeah, Jews don't like Christianity because they deny the last days Messiah, placing the murdered brother as the last days Messiah. But Jesus did not fulfill the requirements of the last days Messiah. Thus, he cannot be the last days Messiah. There is no second coming. It's a misinterpretation of a future son of Jesus to restore the kingdom of Jesus. That is the second coming. Power. So yeah, Maimonides is just talking about his personal beliefs. That's why I'm skimming through it to skip ahead to find things that specifically pertain to the last days Messiah. Then he goes over the pure language again. How will this come about? The entire world has already become filled with the mention of Messiah, Torah, and Mitzvah. These matters have been spread to the furthermost islands, to the stubborn-hearted nations. They discuss these matters. These mitzvah were true, but were already negated in the present age and are not applicable for our time. Well, it can be symbolic, though, so don't discard the mitzvah too quickly. Alright, when the true Messiah King will arise and prove successful, his position becoming exalted and uplifted, they will all return and realize that their ancestors endowed them with a false heritage, and their prophets and ancestors caused them to err. There's the collapse of the religion that's involved. Not just the government, but the religion. And so understand that there would be no need for the last days Messiah if there was a good, righteous church organization, religious organization on the world that truly belonged to God and was working God's ways in righteousness. So Mormons, you don't understand that. You know, Joseph Smith, if you haven't been catching on, Joseph Smith was murdered, and a usurper took over the LDS Church. Joseph Smith told Emma, his wife, that his son will be the new church leader. Joseph was following the pattern in the Torah that I've been talking about this whole time, and comes from the Egyptians. So yes, your church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has to be corrupted. It has to be usurped with your founder murdered in order to fit the prophecies of all the prophets and the Torah. And if you don't fit that, which you actually do, then you're not the true church. But you are the true church in the sense that your founder was murdered and the usurper, Brigham Young, took over the church. And then a last days Messiah will come and restore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, it's not just the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints he's restoring the ancient order of things. He's restoring Christianity. He's restoring Judaism. He's restoring Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. He's restoring it all. The true religion of God, the God. There's no more different gods anymore. There will be only one true God. So even though everybody thinks their God is the one true God, again, go back to your origins. Okay. Halacha 1. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change, and there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. And then he uses Isaiah 11:6. He says, although Isaiah states, Lamb and the lion will dwell in peace. Let's see. These words are a metaphor and a parable. No. Isaiah is prophesying. And parables, as I pointed out from Zechariah, with the cedar tree of Lebanon, it actually is symbolic of who the person is. These will actually happen. The wolf will dwell with the lamb. But you got to domesticate the wolf in order for that to happen. Lamb is already domesticated, but you have to domesticate the wolf. Guess who is a part of the wolf family? Dogs. There are sheepdogs, aren't there, who help gather the lambs. That's been fulfilled. But it was fulfilled a long time ago. But that's how you do it. You domesticate the wild animals, and they no longer perform naturally. So, sorry, Maimonides. You can't let your bias alter interpretation of prophets. Okay. So again, he's doing the same thing. Other messianic prophecies of this nature are metaphors. No, he will be a real person. He will be able to do these things. Don't let your biases change who this person's supposed to be in your mind, so that you reject him when he does come. Halakha 2, our sages taught, there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. There will be a huge difference when you have one king over all the world. And there's going to be a lot of difference. So again, don't impose your thinking as to how things are supposed to be in your mind. War of Gog and Magog will take place at the beginning of the Messianic age. It's already happened. That was Bush who caused that. And I did a video earlier this morning on the opioid crisis in the United States caused by our government when they took over Afghanistan, thus taking over the opiate crops. And I provided a video link in that video so that you can see the documentary for yourself of how Afghanistan is the #1 producer in the world by far of opiates. And I show you the graph in the beginning of my video of when the change occurred in our nation, and it was after we went into Afghanistan. We caused it. The Russians have their propaganda videos accusing the United States of this, but I did it independent of them. And so, alright, Malachi, yeah, very good. Maimonides connects Elijah to the last days Messiah. And Malachi 3:22 is what his reference is. Behold, I am sending you Elijah, the last days Messiah. So the tradition of the Jews that the Elijah who is to come during Passover is a spirit of Elijah, a ghost of Elijah, is incorrect. Again, don't let your personal bias influence your imposition of things. Elijah is the last days Messiah, and we'll get to him in the next video when we get to Jewish traditions. And we probably could merge it with the last days signs, because it's just sun, moon, stars signs. He will not come to declare the pure impure, or to declare impure pure. He will not dispute the lineage of those presumed to be of proper pedigree, nor will he validate the pedigree of those whose lineage is presumed blemished. Rather, he will establish peace within the world, thus turning hearts of fathers to children. So that's what they're claiming here. Is it not a genealogy connection back to Adam, but rather a peace between father and son. And if you see the prophecies of the last days, there's war, fathers against sons. And so that's the Jewish interpretation of Malachi 3:24. So Mormons, with their genealogy, that's not the Jewish understanding. That's why the Jews are upset when you're baptizing Jewish Holocaust victims. And now we have a white supremacist again leading the world. So again, as I've warned, watch out for when Trump decides to start operating the gas chambers. It's coming if we don't stop them. Elijah's coming will precede the coming. Okay, there are some sages who say Elijah's coming will precede the coming of the Messiah, and all these and similar matters cannot be definitely known by man until they occur. Yes, we can. Because the last days Messiah is clearly established in the Torah and the Tanakh. And Elijah is part of that. And so we can see that Elijah is one and the same, even though, like I've told you with the symbolism of the stories, Samson is also the last days Messiah. The patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, they're all last days Messiah symbols, but they're also the brother who's usurped from being the birthright blessing, or the one who usurps, as in the case with Cain and Abel. They're all symbols of the last days Messiah. So just because they talk about Elijah, again, last days Messiah is the theme of him. So when he's combating the priests of Baal, that's a last days Messiah battle. You know, he's going up against the false prophets, the false religion, the false church. And that is what the last days Messiah will do. Not only go up against the false king of the land of the United States, but also go up against the false religion of the United States. And it's not the Pope in Italy. He's not in the United States. And so, all right. So we've got no established tradition. You don't need tradition. Go to the Torah. That's your source. If you can't find it in the Torah, then you go to the Tanakh. If you can't find it in the Tanakh, you go to the Talmud. You know this. So you don't need a rabbi to establish a tradition, which is what they did with Elijah and the Passover. No, Elijah is the last days Messiah, as Moses was the last days Messiah. The Passover was about the Exodus, where Moses confronted Pharaoh to retake the kingdom and reestablish the birthright blessing. Last days Messiah symbolism. Elijah has to do with that. He is not a separate individual who will come as a ghost. Last days Messiah will be born human, full human, not half God, half human. Jesus Christ failed on that one too. And so, yeah. Also notice that the Jews believe that Elijah will come and clear up confusion in the Torah. Guess what I just did? Okay. Principles of faith. Now you want to utilize faith in the matter? Okay. Yeah, he's touting his opinion on the matters as to why he can't find it in the Torah. So that's what happens when you don't recognize the Torah. You end up creating a whole excuse or explanation to try to establish a tradition. And as a result, you end up violating the Torah when you do that. Halakha, I can't pronounce this word. 3. During the era of the Messianic king, once his kingdom has been established and all of Israel has gathered around him, the entire nation's line of descent will be established on the basis of his words and the prophetic spirit which will rest upon him. And then they quote Malachi 3:3 for this. He shall sit as a refiner and purifier. In other words, we have a world with an alt-right conservative thinking. I've done the videos, posts, blogs, books, etc. Alt-right conservative thinking is not about equality for all mankind. It is about the higher, elite, pure race. And we need to do away with that. We need to change our thinking. We need to turn away from that thinking. We need to be one in the sense that we all agree we are all equal. We are all human. And as I've pointed out in other videos, we are a 0.2 difference in DNA at a max. That's why we're the human race, is because we all fit within a 0.2 range of difference. 0.2. That's incredibly small. And yet we have blacks, Russians, Asians, South Americans, Mexicans, Europeans, Africans, and blacks. So as you can see, we have lots of different ethnicities in the world, but we're all different by a minuscule 0.2% difference in our DNA at a max. And if you do your DNA through 23andMe, for example, you will find out the origins of your paternal and your maternal lines. My maternal line came from Egypt. My paternal line went through the Levant, Middle East, even though Egypt is Middle East, but the Iraq, which was Assyria, but it goes further back than that. Yeah, we all originated from the same source. Okay. He will purify the lineage of the Levites first. Oh? Who says he has to do that first? He says this is implied by Ezra 2:63. No, it's not. He is a priest of definite lineage. He is a Levite of definite lineage. That doesn't mean he will purify the lineage of the Levites. It just says who he is, that he is a descendant of Levites. Those whose lineage he will not recognize will be lowered to the status of Israelites. That's an interesting way to word that. Is that racist, or lowered to the status of Israelites? Are Israelites not the chosen ones? Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is part of the gathering. He's got to figure out how to house people in the United States. I've done other videos, blogs, books, etc. We can fit 1 billion people at one level over the state of Kansas in a square footage, with everybody having a 100 square foot home. 1 billion people can fit over Kansas. So thus, 7 levels fits the entire world over Kansas. So yeah, there's no population crisis, as much as people like to scare us into thinking that we have to murder people in order to save our planet. No, we don't. Those are lies by the deceivers, by the corruptors. Okay, so yeah, how do you do that? Do you establish separate towers for separate families? You really can't do that, because I foresee a problem with that, where family tribal conflicts occur. Uh, because, when you want to marry someone of a different tribe, uh, how do you do that? You have lots of stories talking about that. The Hatfields and the McCoys of the United States. Romeo and Juliet of Shakespeare. So yeah, we want to avoid potential confrontations of human behavior, and the best way to do that is just a melting pot that the United States was supposed to be. Instead, the United States became a segregated country. We have separate states who are not in agreement with each other in law and in treatment of human beings. And we have communities. Here in Utah, for example, we have separations of the poor versus the rich. The rich live in rich communities and are zoned to remain rich. Draper, for example. Walmart wanted to build a Walmart out in Draper, and the people immediately declared hell no. And so Walmart had to go down into the valley, and so they sort of lost, but it was sort of a compromise. Yeah, I mean, and the Trax line. The Draper residents didn't want Trax line because it would have the homeless from downtown being able to transfer into their areas, and you got to create a boogeyman threat. The homeless are not a threat. The government is the threat that caused homelessness, and thus caused the homeless people to want food, clothing, and shelter. The government is to blame, not the homeless poor. Okay, yeah, he'll figure out how to establish people in their inheritances on the Promised Land, and the way it was done in Israel failed, because as you see from the Tanakh, the northern kingdom split from the southern kingdom, and there was a division. We need to prevent that. We can't have that happen again. And that's prophesied. There will no more be divisions. From north and south, there will be no conflicts anymore. So that has to be resolved. And the last days Messiah will do that. Oh. He will not be of slave lineage. Wow. Are you sure about that? Weren't the Israelites slaves? So again, don't impose your beliefs on this person. We've read from Ezekiel chapter 17 that he will be of low stature. That's slave stature. So he will be of slave lineage. Alright, even though he'll also come of royal lineage. How can that be? How can you have royal lineage with slave lineage? Do you guys not remember Princess Diana? That's how it's done. Okay. Reigning over the entire world, to be exalted, to eat, drink, and celebrate. Rather, they desired to be free, involve themselves in the Torah and wisdom, explained in Alright. Halakha 5. We're getting closer to the end. So we're on page 6 of 7, and we're getting near the end of the time frame for the video anyway. In that era, there will be neither famine or war, the millennial reign of peace, in other words. But before it happens, and as he's battling for the rights and freedoms of the people, there will be famine and wars, and envies or competition for goods and services. Will flow in abundance. So, yeah, there'll be prosperity. So he will establish a new economy. Everybody will be treated equally. Everybody will be free. There will be no slavery. Everybody will prosper. And everybody will have long lives. And the Jews will be great sages and know the hidden matters, grasping the knowledge of their Creator according to the full extent of human potential. Again, this has to do with, he's quoting Isaiah 11:9. The world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. That doesn't mean Jews. It's the whole house of Israel. But from Ezekiel 37 that I pointed out, he will restore the Torah. There are missing things in the Torah. He will explain the weird passages in the Torah. He will explain the questions that people have had about the Torah. And that is part of the Ezekiel 37 prophecy, where the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah will be made one. He will utilize the stick of Joseph, which is from the Egyptian documents, and merge it with the Torah, the Paleo-Hebrew document, and restore the original Torah text as it was under Moses in the Egyptian language. Okay. Okay. Books of Judges. All right, and that is that is it. Okay, so again, JewsForJerusalem.org is my source for this. And as I pointed out to you, you cannot impose your beliefs in violation of higher authority documents, the Torah being the highest authority document for the Jews. And as I've pointed out, Ezekiel 37 says that the last days Messiah will utilize the book of Joseph, which comes from the Egyptian documents, because at the beginning it talks about the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, thus the Egyptian documents. And I've done other videos to point out Abraham was an Egyptian, not a Semite from Assyria or Babylon, actually, because that's a post-captivity Jewish imposition on the Torah, and that needs to be corrected, purified, or refined, as I've previously read to you. And so yeah, all that work needs to be done, and this is the end of Maimonides and his understanding of the last days Jewish Messiah. Okay, and the next video will be about the last days signs in the Tanakh and the Jewish traditions, which will cover specifically the Passover with the Exodus, and also about Elijah, which involves Lilith. Yeah.